Vlad TV started in 2008, 2009. YouTube was really early.
No, he wasn't doing YouTube and stuff. He was going around talking a lot of shit. And we all from Harlem. So he was just talking a lot of shit. And it's a small, Harlem is small.
So what was Gene Deal saying during that time? What did you hear?
He basically was talking about Puff fighting women, hitting women, shit that was going on with him and Kim, Puff being gay, you know, shit with him and Usher and shit like that. He was talking the same shit that he's talking now on a major scale, but he was spreading it around Harlem.
It came to life for y'all. It came to life for y'all that this dude wanted me dead way before I came to YouTube. Because I was having meetings with serious dudes in the street and he refused to sit down. So what did he do? He tell his security team. He didn't tell the NYPD officers. He didn't tell the Department of Correction officers. He didn't tell none of the parole officers or anybody he had working for him that was officers. He told street dudes who had did dirt in the street. When y'all see Gene, y'all do him dirty. Y'all beat him up. He ain't tell him to beat me up. What I look like getting beat up?
Gene Deal is not a new name to old school hip hop fans. He wasn't a rapper, not a producer, but a bodyguard, the kind of man who stood behind every setup, knew everything, yet was never allowed to speak. Jean once stood beside Diddy during the height of the bad boy era, a time when hits were blasting across America, when the stage was full of fireworks, the crowd screamed, and backstage was filled with things that never made it to the press. He saw it all, from behind the scenes deals with artists, those so-called backyard spiritual sessions, to the way they handle anyone who dared to talk trash about the boss. And it wasn't handled with words, it was literal. Talk too much, and suddenly your car's brakes stop working. That's when you understand what real power is. But Gene was different. He retired. And now he talks. And he doesn't just ramble, he lays out the stories, the context, the years, the names. What he tells sounds less like gossip and more like a true crime documentary, except it's told in the voice of an old uncle who complains a lot, which makes it real, raw, and very, very American. Not enough for you? Roger Bonds steps into the picture. If Gene was a former bodyguard, Roger was the head of security, the guy who knew who was coming, who was leaving, who got on the plane, and who got crossed off the list. Roger didn't just confirm Gene's words. He added to them. He said that Diddy once ordered people to silence loose mouths. To put it bluntly, hiring someone else to shut people up was real. And if Gene was ever on that list, then maybe he only survived because of some technical oversight. At this point, it's no longer two old guys talking nonsense. It's an unofficial investigation. Two witnesses who were once paid to stay quiet are now using their own experiences to speak against the very system they once protected. That's what Americans call breaking the code, going against the unspoken laws of the powerful. And in America, you know how it works. Power doesn't sit in titles. Power is about who can silence you without ever showing their face. People like Diddy don't have to lift a finger, the system moves on its own. A single phone call, a friendly meeting, a few personal threats. And if you still don't shut up, sorry, you may never go on air again. And it's precisely because he knows this so well that Jean Deal's decision to keep talking is something worth paying attention to. He isn't a YouTuber making things up for views. He's a man who once touched the dirty underside of glory, and now he's back to say, behind all that glitter was hell. The real question isn't, do you believe Gene? But do you dare to believe? When everything you've ever heard about American stars, about inspiration, about rising from nothing, about the rags to riches dream, might all just be a shell built from fear, money, and silence paid in blood? Every empire has its betrayers, but sometimes the so-called traitor is simply the first person brave enough to tell the truth. And if that's the case, then Jean Deal is not just some loud old man. He is a living witness to an era when power didn't just control the radio, it controlled lives. Now you've heard it. What do you think? Drop a comment and let me know. Do you see Gene as doing the right thing? Or just an old man making one last play before fading from the stage? Gene tells it as if he's been holding these stories in his gut for 20 years, only now finally spitting them out. Not for clicks, but to let it out. A chase, a car, 4 men, 5 guns, Gene sitting there staring down the barrels, asking himself, am I dead already? He never said exactly who sent those men after him, but then he dropped one line, a line that gave people chills. I don't know if it was Diddy, but Roger Bonds once told me somebody wanted me taken care of. That way of speaking in America, they call it speak without speaking. Say it without saying it, so you stay alive. Gene knew how to play the survival game. No one makes it through that world for over a decade without learning the unspoken rules. And he understood. He knew how to hint, how to choose his words, how to tell the story just enough for smart people to get it, but not enough to get sued or to disappear. This makes you ask a bigger question. In a country that everyone thinks of as the land of democracy, of free speech, where everyone has a voice, how many people have been silenced in exactly the way Gene described? How many who once dared to speak are even still alive? Don't fool yourself into thinking Hollywood is a paradise of lights. Hollywood is where people with money, influence, and connections build an entire ecosystem of power where the press is just another tool and silence is its own currency. Stay silent and you live. Speak and you're gone. Gene described the gunpoint incident, and then he asked, why didn't I die right then? Was it because Diddy never gave the order? Or did some soldier down the line just screw up? But whatever the reason, the message was crystal clear. Someone wanted Gene gone. And the shadow behind that someone was big enough that it kept him silent for more than 2 decades. And now that he's finally talking, what do you see? Attention, support, but also something very dangerous. Because the more Gene talks, the deeper he digs into the murky water that people have spent millions to keep calm. Look around. How many others have been like Gene, spoke up once and then suddenly vanished, died in accidents, or committed suicide under bizarre circumstances? When a man like Gene tells his story, the scariest part isn't what he says. It's how he says it with the calmness of someone already used to almost being killed. America doesn't lack lawyers, doesn't lack journalists. What it lacks are people willing to look straight into the system and point out, here's where it's rotten. And Gene is doing exactly that in the voice of a man who once had 5 guns pointed at his head. After hearing this much, do you still think he's just an old man telling stories for fun? Or are you starting to feel the chill down your spine? Diddy, also known as Sean Combs, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, is the perfect poster boy for the rapper's American dream. From nothing to a global icon. A music mogul, a hit-making machine, a fashion player, vodka, media, and if you believe Gene's account, even silencing schemes. People saw Diddy on magazine covers, on award shows, in the studio, but few ever asked, where does his power really come from? And how does it actually operate? This is the part where you need to slow down and look carefully. Diddy wasn't just famous for music. He was famous for controlling the game. He wasn't just an artist. He was the artist boss. Bad Boy Entertainment, at its peak, was practically a mini empire. Artists signed contracts, lived by Diddy, and in some cases, died by Diddy. 1 hit was yours. 3 hits belonged to Diddy. 1 show was yours. A nationwide tour only happened because he picked up the phone. You get the idea. In American showbiz, power doesn't live on stage, it lives backstage. In those midnight phone calls and contracts only one side truly understood. And whether or not you made it on television depended on the mood of the big man that day. Diddy embodied that kind of power. And according to Gene and Roger, that power wasn't always clean. Have you ever seen a power empire collapse? It never falls from a single punch. It falls from a crack, a fracture in the system. Someone inside turning around to tell the truth. A retired bodyguard recalling old stories. A former head of security who's tired of keeping secrets. That's exactly what Gene and Roger are. When 2 men who once stood in the inner circle of power start speaking, the first crack has already appeared. And once you see the crack, no matter how much gold plating, awards, or billboard covers you slap on the wall, it can all come crumbling down with just a light tap. The danger here isn't whether Gene is right or wrong. The danger is that he's talking about someone nobody dares touch, and he's not talking alone. In America, people aren't strangers to domino-style collapses. Weinstein, R. Kelly, Epstein, names nobody dared to confront for years. But all it took was the right testimony at the right time, and the entire system shook. So the question is Diddy heading toward that same ending? Are Gene and Roger just ungrateful ex-employees biting the hand that once fed them? Or are they the first alarm bells, warning about a system that's been rotten for years and is only now starting to stink? And most importantly, how many others, artists, staff, ex-girlfriends, former bodyguards are just waiting for the right moment to speak too. If you think this is just a personal scandal, you're wrong. This is a story about an industry where loyalty is bought with contracts and silence is paid for with safety. And when that silence breaks, everything can go up in smoke in a week. People love to say, "Oh, please, celebrity drama, who cares? It's just people with too much money making a scene." But let's be real, that's exactly how the system wants you to think. Because once you dismiss drama as entertainment, as a joke, as just some rappers beefing, you'll never question the power behind it. And they get to stay safe, stay in control of the media, and keep manipulating the entire industry of manufactured images. That's why stories like John Deals are dangerous to insiders, but priceless to outsiders. Because they show us something deeply American. Here, free speech has limits, and those limits are defined by power. You can say anything as long as you don't touch the big man. You can make critical videos as long as you don't say the real names. You can live authentically as long as you're not too real. Gene crossed that line, and by doing so, he's not just challenging Diddy's reputation, he's tugging at the very system that allowed Diddy to exist, get rich, and remain untouchable for 20 years. Think about it. R. Kelly was once the king of R&B. Weinstein was the kingpin of Hollywood film. Epstein hosted parties for the Washington elite. They all collapsed the moment an insider finally opened their mouth. And it always starts the same way. People laugh. They call the whistleblower a loser, a liar, someone desperate for attention. But then the pieces start surfacing. A second person speaks up, then a third, and suddenly a whole chain of once silent people turning to tell their side of the story. And here's the kicker. None of them were saints. Those who spoke up had once been involved, once stayed silent, once benefited. But you know what? In a dirty system, sometimes the least dirty person is the cleanest you've got. John isn't a saint. Roger Bonds isn't some accidental hero. But at the very least, they chose not to stay silent forever. And that act in a world where silence is considered wisdom is rebellion. You may think you're watching just another podcast clip, just another storytime video, but what you're actually looking at is a mirror reflecting American society where showbiz, politics, business, media all run on the same formula. Power to control to suppression to make people believe nothing ever happened. But then, one person speaks, and if you really listen, you'll realize this isn't drama. This is a warning. Believe it or not, that's up to you. But if you brush it off, you're also ignoring one of the clearest clues about how this society is being bent by those in power. Now let's circle back to you, the person watching this clip right now. Maybe you're in your bedroom. Maybe scrolling on your phone on the bus. Maybe you just turned off Netflix because you were bored. Wherever you are, you just heard a story that probably if Gene Deal hadn't opened his mouth would never have existed in the first place. So let me ask you something real. If you were Gene, would you tell it? If you knew an entire system of power stood behind you, ready to make you disappear with just one phone call. If you knew that speaking meant losing everything, your reputation, your safety, maybe even your life, would you still open your mouth? It sounds easy. Everybody says, if it were me, I'd speak out. But in reality, the truth is, in the entire American entertainment industry, only a handful dare to speak. The rest, they stay silent. Not because they're cowards, but because they know sometimes truth is the most dangerous thing you can carry. In America, people praise freedom, but they also gag freedom with money, with contracts, with the laughter of the media. Think about it. How many times has someone spoken up only to be called crazy, making it up, or attention seeking? And how many more never spoke at all because they were terrified of being treated exactly like that? So the real question isn't, is Gene telling the truth? The real question is, do we even deserve the truth? Because if every time someone speaks the truth, we scroll past, we sneer, we dismiss it as just another stunt, then sorry, we're also protecting the very system Gene is trying to expose. And if you're still here, listening all the way to this point, then maybe you're not like the majority. Maybe you feel there's actually something worth thinking about. So here's something simple you can do. Leave a comment. Doesn't have to be profound. Just answer one question. If you knew a dangerous truth, would you dare to speak it? And if you believe this story deserves to be heard by more people, then share it. Send it to that one curious friend. To the one who thinks celebrities are untouchable. To the one who always says drama is just drama. Because who knows, maybe the next truth revealed will start with a single click of share.